Hey guys, Javelin here and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'll be ranking the areas in the lands between from least to most favorite based on aesthetic, enemies, and bosses. So without any further delay, let's get started. Starting off at number 10, we have the Altus Plateau. This area really only had the shaded castle and windmill villages for interesting locations and felt like a copy and paste of Limgrave. The enemy placement here is okay, but it is the first time we run into an ancient dragon once we get here, so that's a plus. And the open area aspect to the Godskin Apostle boss fight was interesting. I give this area about a D, landing it last on the list. Number 9, you can probably guess, is Limgrave and the Weeping Peninsula. Although I got a bit teary-eyed my first time stepping out into the lands between, after a bit of adjusting this area felt easy, which is good, especially for people who haven't played any of From Software's previous installments. It's good for a beginning area, but if you're a seasoned Souls player like myself, it's quite easy and doesn't really fulfill the legacy of getting absolutely gaped in the beginning of the games like I did in previous titles. The enemies are pretty decent and feel like they belong and really give you a solid feel for how the common enemy types are going to be for the rest of the game. Stormvale Castle is definitely the crown jewel of this area and really hammers in the basics of playing this style of game, which is practice and preparation are key to the adventure. This area is a C-, which is why it's 9th on the list. Coming in at number 8 is Mountaintop of the Giants. Now, although I love the snowy and mysterious atmosphere here, this area felt sort of underwhelming, and even though it has a lot of relevant locations to the lore, it still feels kind of empty. But the redeeming factors are the enemies and locations. The freezing lake in Ordina, the fights with Borealis and Theodorix, and the main boss fight with the last fire giant gives this area its redeeming qualities. Overall, I give this area a C in the 8th spot on the list. At number 7 is Volcano Manor and Mount Gelmir as a whole area. The feeling this place gives when you cross the bridge is strange. I thought I was going to be attacked immediately only to be met with soldiers pillaging and eating each other. I love the subtle storytelling with the village of demi-humans learning magic from the sorcerers, who are seemingly protecting Azur from the looks of it. The mini-bosses were all quite fair and didn't feel like they were randomly placed, and I definitely enjoyed scaling the mountain itself. I loved the Volcano Manor questline, and Riker's battle was definitely fantastic. If they do anything with this area for DLC, it'd be interesting to see where they go with it. I give this place a B-, making it 7th on the list. Number 6 is Langdale, capital of Ash, and subterranean shunning grounds as a whole area. I really enjoyed this place, from the view of Grandsax, the Erdtree, the twists and turns in both the shunning grounds and the streets of the capital, enemy placement and variety, and overall architecture was great. Getting down to the shunning grounds was pretty interesting, and I enjoyed the close quarters combat and finding the Cathedral of the Forsaken where we first fight Moog, almost like a descent into madness, which is appropriate because the Frenzied Flame prescription is behind the altar, where you can find the remains of the Grand Caravan and you can strip yourself of all your equipment and allow the Three Fingers to grasp you, passing the Frenzied Flame to you and becoming its vessel. This is definitely B territory, which is why it's 6th on the list. Number 5 on the list is Caelid. I absolutely love this area. Not only is it difficult in a non-force way to me, but its overall aesthetic is inspired by the Eclipse, an event in the manga Berserk by Kentaro Miura, which is one of my personal favorites. During the Eclipse, Griffith summons the God Hand and offers the entirety of the Band of the Hawk as sacrifice towards achieving his dream, and he also does some unsavory things we aren't going to talk about. Sort of like Millennia when she faced Radahn. When she felt like there was no victory in sight, she releases the Scarlet Aeonia and essentially destroys Caelid. From the Radahn boss fight to the Swamp of Scarlet Rot with the blooming Scarlet Aeonia, the puzzle in the town of Celia, the Mother of Dragons, and the Bestial Sanctum, this area definitely deserves to be top 5 and gets a B+, which is why it's 5th on my list. Coming in at number 4 is the Halktree. Now you might be wondering why I chose to separate this from the Mountaintop of the Giants. Well, simply put, the reason is because this location feels and looks like a completely different place from the mountaintops. When I first arrived here, my mind was absolutely blown at the sheer beauty of this area. It definitely feels like DLC, sort of similar to the Ring City in DS3 with its disconnection from the main world. The enemy placement was sort of annoying but understandable, as the ants and envoys are well placed, with the soldiers, demi-humans, and crystallians inhabiting the inner area. I also enjoyed the mini-bosses that pop up, and the ending to Millicent's questline where you choose to fight with or against her in order to get the needle you use to trade for the unalloyed gold needle, which keeps the influence of the outer gods at bay. And the fight against Millennia was absolutely terrific. It took me a few tries, but I managed, and I definitely gotta say that this is the standard I'm going to hold future bosses at in the game. Overall, this is definitely an A in my opinion on the ranking scale, placing it at 4th on the list. At number 3 we have the Eternal Cities, one of the most visually appealing areas in the game. First off, making my way down here was extremely immersive, as I found myself watching my back and being cautious when I made any turns. Secondly, walking out to see the in quotes night sky hanging over the Eternal Cities buildings was breathtaking. The first words out of my mouth were verbatim, "I've never seen anything like this that gives me this kind of feeling." Honestly, the only thing I didn't really enjoy from this area was the crabs. All other enemies felt well placed and the difficulty was balanced for the most part. The mini-bosses of the areas were awesome and I really enjoyed Estelle's fight. It felt like the cherry on top. The Lake of Rot and Grand Cloister were pretty good other than having to bulldoze through the Scarlet Rot, and the boss fight with Fortisax is definitely up there with Placidusax. I give these locations as a whole an A+, landing it in the 3rd spot on this list. Number 2 for this list is Crumbling Fair, Missoula. I love that this area feels like a combination of the Dragon Area location and Ring City locations, with the architecture being reminiscent of the Ring City and the dragons flying around being inspired from the Dragon Area. It's definitely visually stunning, especially with the tornado looming nearby. Being able to explore this area was refreshing. The beastmen weren't overbearing, all the dragon mini-bosses were welcome, the single Crucible Knight and Draconian Erdtree Knight were pretty tough, the worm faces didn't feel out of place, and fighting Bernal was sort of heart-wrenching, as we were allies at one point with a common cause. The fight with Malekith is definitely close with Millennia's fight as a favorite, and the fight with Placidusax is definitely my favorite boss fight overall. Getting an S tier ranking, this location definitely deserves 2nd place on this list. And finally, coming in at the number 1 spot is Liurnia. I love everything about this place, from enemy placement, quest lines, locations, viewpoints, and architectural aesthetic. This area really does it for me. I'd find myself hanging out in spots with really good views and letting the music play as I write my scripts. I'd say my favorite viewpoint is behind the Church of Vows, where you can see the Academy, 4 belfries, and the Cathedral of Manus Celis at just the right angle, and on a night where the sky is clear and we have the leaves of the Erdtree falling, is the chef's kiss of this game. The level of mystery and intrigue I get from this area is about the same as down in the Eternal Cities, with enemy placement being very well balanced and also making sense with the locations. And there's almost no forced difficulty outside of the groups of giant crayfish. For mini-bosses, I'd say that they're fair, with the exception of Smaragd and Adula, which are fantastic dragon fights. We also have the Frenzied Flame Village where we fight Vike, the multiple Wandering Mausoleums, and the Black Knife Catacombs where we get the Black Knife print, which we give to the love of our lives, Ronnie, and she explains what happened on the night of the Black Knives. The main boss fight with Renala felt huge and was pretty spectacular, but it could be a bit more difficult if I'm being honest. I don't even have to go into the architecture of this area, but to keep it short and sweet, it is flawless. This area gets an S tier with flying colors, making it number 1 on this list indefinitely. That's all for today, guys. If you made it to the end of this video, you have my thanks. I'd like to give a special shout out to Dim, who I discussed some of this video with, and I changed the placement of some places after some recollection. If you enjoyed what you saw, like the video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more content. I'll see you in the next one.